Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by my good friend and colleague Rod Babers. We're going to talk about some problem areas for Texas last year in its 3 losses and correcting those as a key, not just to Saturday's game against Ohio State, but if the Longhorns want to maximize the 2025 season, they've got to get these areas cleaned up. Before we do anything else, though, let's thank our sponsor for this edition of On Texas Football. Rod, that's our friends at South Point Dodge.
Yes, sir. Texas football fans, you can score an easy extra point this season when you get to the point with our friends over at South Point Dodge. South Point Dodge has over 600 vehicles in stock right now, including the all-new 2025 Ram 1500. Get the real deal today and drive away in an all-new Ram 1500 proven to last. And right now at South Point Dodge, you get a hell of a deal because you get the employee incentive pricing. That's their fancy way of saying you get the employee discount. You pay what the employees pay right now at South Point Dodge. You won't find a better deal than that. So head on over to South Point Dodge off of I-35 in South Austin, or you can go online at southpointdodge.com and check out their inventory there as well. Whether you need a car, truck, something new, something used, a trade-in, our friends at South Point Dodge pride themselves on being Austin's automotive everything. That's southpointdodge.com.
So, Rod, I've done a couple of articles this week over on TexasFootball.com breaking these areas down. And really, it's 5, but I kind of crammed it into 4, kind of cheating. But we'll get to all of it as we move on. And it's really, I don't think these are going to shock anybody. But, Rod, even as I broke down the numbers, I was surprised at the disparity between what Texas did in the 13 wins last year and what happened in the 3 losses. We'll start with turnover margin. Texas was +8 in turnover margin in the 13 wins. 17 times the offense turned it over, but 25 takeaways by the defense. You figure in the 3 losses, your takeaways are going to go down because you're playing better competition. 6 takeaways in those 3 losses, 2 to Georgia, 1 to Ohio State. But, Rod, what killed Texas last year, 10 turnovers by the offense in those 3 losses. You can't turn it over that much and beat light competition. You just can't.
No, and that was an issue for Texas all year long. I mean, you go look at turnovers lost. I mean, Texas had 26 of them on the season. Guys, that was 129th in the country. That's a lot of turnovers for Texas. So not only was that an issue in those big games, that was an issue for Texas all year long. You clean up some of that. You just become in middle of the road or average to below average team and taking care of the football. Man, that could mean tremendous strides on offense for you.
No doubt. Penalties is another one right now. In the 3 losses, what's going to skew the penalty numbers is the SEC championship game. 11 assessed penalties Texas had in that game for 94 yards. If you look at the 3 losses, Rod, 8 accepted penalties per game, 63 penalty yards per game. But in the 13 wins, 6 accepted penalties per game, 42.9 penalty yards assessed per game. Again, the SEC championship skews those numbers, but let's not forget 4th and 13 wouldn't have been 4th and 13 against Arizona State had it not been for a pre-snap penalty. You talk about just being detail-oriented. Great teams, what takes the great teams to like championship status is the team that pays attention to details. And Texas at times last year in some of these big games was just not very detail-oriented. Almost caught up with them against Arizona State. I think to an extent did catch up with them against Ohio State. But, Rod, penalties are really something that's been a problem pretty much since Sark took the job, and it's one of those things that's got to get rectified sooner or later.
Yeah, especially the pre-snap penalties on the offensive line. That's one of those things for Texas to where, they've been undisciplined. I went and looked at it. I was like, because they played a lot of games. You play a lot of games, over time, maybe you stack a lot of penalties. I look at Ohio State. Ohio State was 56th in penalties. Texas was 127th overall. So you can't really say, they played so many games. Like, no, Texas is actually an undisciplined team. And a lot of that, they come in, and a lot of those were on special teams too. That's some special teams penalties. Last year, close to like a third of your teams penalties came on special teams. That's also a big problem for Texas.
And where do the special teams penalties hurt you most? They kill you in field position if you get a return called back or whatever the case, or you're getting a penalty on a punt, like you're putting the defense in a bad spot, or you're backing the offense up. We talked about it last year, Rod. Texas, by and large, one of the worst field position teams in the country. We're talking about those outside the margins. You look at like the big numbers that matter, but man, it's those areas outside the margins where Texas needs to trim up and just be a little more tidy in 2025 to get to where it wants to be. Let's talk about the red zone. Rod. And Sark is correct. He was correct on Monday when he said, look, the touchdown rate from 23 to 24 improved. There were 51% touchdown rate in the red zone in 2023, 64% last year. Still, go back and look at the numbers last year. In the 13 wins, Texas had about a 67% touchdown rate, 61 red zone possessions in the 13 wins, 41 touchdowns. Rod, you go to the 3 losses, 8 red zone possessions, 3 touchdowns. Just gotta be better against good competition. And it's so bad. I think it's easy to put it on Sark's play calling. But Rod, we talked about this is one of those scenarios we've talked a lot about over the years where it's so bad, everybody gets to share the blame and the ineptitude.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. It's a multifactorial kind of issue for you. If it was just one thing, I think Sark would have solved it by now. If it was just one issue, at times you're your own worst enemy. Texas in short yardage hadn't been great, getting a push, being able to play a kind of a physical style of football there. That's also hurt him. I think at times Quinn would struggle in the red zone, getting through progressions quick enough. I think that's a problem. And also Sark has taken some ownership and said, hey, play calling. Right. And the way that really the way that he positions the plays, he's talked about that a few times, that, maybe it's the sequencing of the plays that he's got to be a little bit better at. So, yeah, it's one of those things where it's one of the biggest mysteries, I think, for Texas, because talent is not it. You've had probably more players drafted on offense than anybody in college football the last 2 years, and yet it has not translated to wins in the red zone.
And that's the thing, Rod. We've got enough studies now, whether it's 24/7 Sports does the team talent composite, Bud Elliott at CBS does the blue chip ratio. Without question, Texas has a top 5, you can argue maybe the most talented roster in the country. Yep. And if Texas loses games, it's not going to be, but the Arizona State game is a perfect example. If Texas had lost that game, it wasn't going to be because Texas was out talented. It was because you stubbed your toe so often that you ended up knocking your toe off and you bled out from that injury. But you've got to be cleaner. When you're not clean against Georgia, when you're not clean against Ohio State, that's where you're not talented enough to overcome so many self-inflicted wounds. This is, though, Rod, where I think Mason Shipley could help. And again, you're talking about going from being really bad to maybe if you're just average. Last year in the 13 wins, if you just look at total red zone scores, Texas was an 82% scoring rate in the red zone last year, just overall, if you include field goals. In the 13 wins, in the 3 losses, 62.5% scoring rate in the red zone. That includes missed field goals. So if Mason Shipley can clean up some of that, then at least your margin for error is going to increase a little bit.
Yep, I totally agree with you. And, I think all around the kicking game, I think it'll influence Sark too. In terms of his red zone play calling too, to have a kicker that he can depend on. I think late in the season last year, I think it definitely affected Sark not being able to trust his kicker.
The other area I wanted to look at, Rod, is really trench play. I kind of try to break it up. Okay, to break it up, pass protection, run game, but it all kind of goes together at the end of the day. Under Steve Sarkisian, Texas is 33-4 when they win the rushing yardage battle. In Sark's tenure, Texas has held 19 opponents under 100 yards rushing. They've won 18 of those games. The one game they lost was the Cotton Bowl loss to Ohio State. Ohio State only had 81 yards rushing in the Cotton Bowl, and Texas ended up losing the game because for all the reasons we talked about. But Rod, the running game, and when you talk about pass protection, Texas allowed 37 sacks last year. 17 of those were in the 3 losses. So yeah, it goes back to something you said a few minutes ago, Rod. If you just close the gap a little bit, you don't have to become necessarily elite in those areas. If you just close the gap a little bit and just become average, that could make all the difference for you at the end of the day.
Yeah, it just seems like some of the issues Texas had, as a team overall, they were exacerbated in those big games, those losses to Georgia and to Ohio State. I think that's what happens when you go up against, elite caliber competition. But then I was shocked when I looked at tackles for loss numbers for Texas. I mean, Texas had the most tackles for loss allowed in college football last year. Yeah. Like the most period. Now they played a lot of games. You look at tackles for loss allowed per game, they were 122nd. They just allowed a lot of negative plays. If you look, so havoc rate allowed is something I know you keep up with a lot. Havoc rates. In those games, a havoc rate allowed to Georgia and to Ohio State. I know you talked about that. They were way too high. I mean, they had to be approaching close to 30% havoc rate on in some of those games. That, I think, has been a big issue for Texas because that keeps you behind the chains a lot of the times. Goes back to what you talked about the running game. The running game did not work in those losses. Texas, I think averaged like less than 40 net rushing yards overall in those 3 losses. So your running game's not working, which means you're going to be behind the chains there. And then you got penalties, put you even more behind the chains. And then you talk about negative plays early on, put you more behind the chains. That means you were in second and long and third and long way too often against elite competition in those losses. That's definitely something that's interconnected for Texas.
Yeah, even when you adjust the sack yards, adjust the rushing yards to take out sacks, you're averaging 77 yards per game and 3.4 yards per attempt. Now, the 3.4 yards per attempt, that's something that's doable. Because, again, when you're facing elite-level defenses, to quote the late, great Mike Leach, man, you never go broke making a profit. Like 3.5 yards a play on the ground is something you just got to keep hammering away. And hopefully, again, those 2 and 3 yard runs become 6 and 7 yard runs, and the 6 and 7 yarders become 12 to 15 yarders as the game goes on. But the 77 total yards, that's just not going to cut it. And like you said, Rod, when you factor in sacks, because in college football, your rushing numbers do include sacks. Texas in the 3 losses last year, 39.3 rushing yards per game, 1.4 yards per attempt. That's not going to cut the mustard at any level. And I think when whether we're talking about pass protection, the run game, the red zone, not necessarily penalties, but maybe even turnovers too, just in terms of being able to get away and maybe throw a ball away, save a possession. Arch's legs, Rod, could be the thing that makes the difference for Texas this year, knowing that you've got a quarterback that has some mobility. If he's got the pocket awareness, we all saw a little bit from Arch Manning last year, but if he can expound on that, that could, again, I think Mason Shipley helping clean up some stuff inside the 40 on field goal attempts and Arch's legs. It's hard to say those two things could be the difference between Texas being a semifinal team for the third year in a row and being a national champion. But really, those two things could be the difference.
I hate to put so much on the young man because I feel like that. I feel like we break something down. Like this could be a real problem issue for Texas or problematic area for Texas. Like, but Arch, his skill set, and it's like, well, Arch can fix it all. But I agree with you. I think the red zone issues, even Mac Brown talked about it, like, hey, we had really good red zone teams because we had quarterbacks that could move around and run. I think it also helps you in terms of pass protection, being able to avoid some of those negative plays we're talking about, tackles for loss and no sacks, and just being better and smarter with the football, making better decisions overall. That should help you lower some of those turnover numbers or those turnover-worthy plays. You should be able to decrease those as well. And just being more buttoned up, right, as an offense, executing at a higher level with the penalties too. So I'm with you. I feel like Arch, his skill set, and if he just plays plays consistently at a higher level, you can solve a lot of these issues with just his presence as the starting quarterback. But that's putting a lot on the young man because it's a team game. It ain't all his issues to fix. They got to fix it on offense a little bit.
We are on the cusp of seeing how all this is going to play out. The season opener is on Saturday, and then we got a 12-game regular season. We'll see what the postseason is. But, Rod, it's here. We made it. We made it to game day, and now we get to stop talking about it. We actually get to watch it and then break down actual football. Rod, thank you for the knowledge and expertise as always. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Thank you to the entire On Texas Football staff. If you're not a member, over to ontexasfootball.com. Get over there right now. Sign up using the promo code OTFOG. That's OTFOG. Put in that promo code when you sign up. That'll get you 1 year of access at ontexasfootball.com for $39.95. Don't forget to like this video and make sure you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whether it's the Ohio State game or any of the other 11 regular season games or any of the postseason games before, during, and after, we've got you covered at On Texas Football and ontexasfootball.com. For Rod, for Matthew, for our friends at South Point Dodge for sponsoring it, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and until next time, hook 'em.
Hook 'em horns.